Okay, can we have the presentation by Mr. Bear on the Copeland Middle School Code of Conduct?
Good evening. I just want to first and foremost thank the Board of Education, Dr. Corbett, for the opportunity to present some information on our revised Code of Conduct. And when I would talk about Code of Conduct tonight, I'm going to use the words Code of Conduct quite a bit, but I'm also going to be referencing a lot of work that we did surrounding dress code and the cell phone electronic device guidelines that are also have been under revision. There is a motion on the agenda tonight for approval. And I'm not going to get, I do understand that these documents were shared with the Board of Education prior to the weekend. You've had a few days with them and sat with them. So I'm not going to use tonight as an opportunity to go every single detail of those. There will be an opportunity pending approval for that at a later date. Tonight I want to kind of walk you through the thought process and the procedures that we put in place in order for me to get here tonight to present the revisions to these Code of Conduct. I'm going to try to use the clicker if it works. Okay. So I'm going to walk you through the steps that brought us towards the revision of the Code of Conduct tonight. But one of those steps was creating a committee. And I'll get to the committee here shortly. We'll talk about the members. We'll talk about some of the discussions, the meeting dates, etc. But one of the key questions that I asked the committee to kind of start off this process, I said, why do we have a Code of Conduct? What's the purpose of a Code of Conduct? And, I heard a lot of things like it provides accountability, a system of checks and balances. We need to have discipline consequences, and all those things are accurate. But one of the comments that really stuck out to me was a code of conduct in a school is very similar to a set of laws or a structure for a community. And if you think about what a school is, if you think about what Copeland Middle School is, we're a microcosm of a greater community. We are a community in ourselves here at Copeland Middle School. And much of what you're going to hear me talk about tonight is about community building, right? And using a code of conduct, having a code of conduct be the guiding force that shapes that community and really promotes who we are as Copeland Middle School. So getting into the nuts and bolts, we talk about a code of conduct of providing a sense of order for us here at the middle school, providing a sense of accountability, promoting a positive school culture and climate. And for us at Copeland Middle School, and this being my first year as principal, this is a key step in promoting that positive school culture and climate as we head into a very important year, year here in the 2023-24 school year. It promotes a healthy and safe school environment for all students. And the Code of Conduct has a significant impact on harassment, intimidation, and bullying, attendance, and overall student learning. And again, going back to building a community here at Copeland Middle School and shaping what that community is and who we are when we enter Copeland Middle School and who we are when our students graduate Copeland Middle School. So, getting back to some of the logistics of the process, I want to walk you through the process. If you'll go back to June 20th, you'll remember an email was shared by Dr. Corbett that went out to the community that advised of my position starting July 1st, and some of the main tasks that I would be taking on over the summer is revising the Code of Conduct here at Copeland Middle School, revising the dress code and the cell phone electronic device guidelines. Okay, so that work started really back then, prior to my first day here at Copeland Middle School. It started with qualitative feedback. It started with conversations with parents, with community members, with staff members, with administrators. And I have to tell you, in the short time I've been here, I'm very impressed. It's very eye-opening to me how invested everyone is into Copeland Middle School being a successful learning environment for our students. And I received some great feedback, and I have to tell you, that feedback all really was kind of in some way or shape or form all really repetitive. It was the same type of feedback that I was hearing over and over again that really helped us shape our process. There was quantitative feedback. We had some help from the technology department in taking a look at a 5-year review of the infractions, of the highest infractions, the number of repeat offenders, the number of students who had 0 offenses throughout the school year, or 1 offense, or 2 offenses, or 3 or 4 or 5. And again, that information really helped the committee steer the process in the direction that we wanted to go. Research spent a significant amount of time researching best practices, researching local school districts throughout New Jersey, school districts throughout the country that had positive reputations for school climate and school culture. We took some guidance from the U.S. Department of Education and the New Jersey Department of Education, some frameworks that are out there, and some guidance that best practices through those organizations for codes of conduct, and of course, making sure that any work we do is aligned with school policy and looking at our regulation here that's already in place. From there, we went right into committee and developing a committee. And what we have on the screen right now, I know I went too far, is our committee. One of the goals in our community was developing a diverse committee of individuals who have experience as parents, as educators. The association played a large role in this, and of course, our administration. So these are the members who served on the committee. There was 9 of us in total. I just want to give a quick thank you, a quick shout out to our committee. This was we worked hard on this, but we worked fast. And one thing we talked about was not sacrificing value for time, but we knew that we had to turn this around fast. It was extremely important to the committee to start the school year with the revisions in place and not have something that we roll out later in January or later in the school year. We felt like if the biggest impact we can make is to start September with the revisions in place. So again, I cannot thank the committee members enough for their work on this process and the sacrifices that they made throughout the summer. Throughout the summer, we held 2 meetings, and while 2 meetings doesn't sound like a lot of meetings for a committee, I will share with you that a good chunk of and a majority of the work occurred prior and in between our first and second meetings throughout the summer. We communicated regularly. I tasked the committee with several tasks after we left the meetings. As we met, we had committee members who were dialing in virtually because they were on vacations with their family. And again, just giving up and making sacrifices to be a part of this process. But I would task them with reviewing the previous code of conduct, reviewing regulation, reviewing other school districts, and coming back to the table. We developed a philosophy statement. We developed a list of infractions and what we thought was important to put in there and whether or not reword it. And I have to tell you, the feedback that they shared through Google Forms was really instrumental in putting together what we believe is a strong code of conduct, a strong dress code, and a strong cell phone electronic device policy and procedure. And again, we communicated through email as well. So in our first meeting, again, one of the first tasks that I tasked our committee with was establishing goals and objectives for the code of conduct. And we talked at length. They also, after the meeting, they shared even more thoughts through feedback, and we came up with a running list of goals and objectives for our revised code of conduct. And what we came up with was to drive students to make more productive decisions, to reduce repeat offenses, and I'll tell you, that piece right there came right out of the data, because what we found is we had a small population of students. We have a large population of students, upwards of 50% of our students who had 0 infractions last year. 70% of the student population, only 1 infraction. 80% of the population, 2 or less. Okay, so if you think about that, we have a small population where we have repeat offenders. And if we could target our resources and our services towards those students, we believe we can make a big impact. Eliminating confusion and ambiguity. And this came from the parents, this came from the staff, and this also came from the administration. It was very important for us to have a fair and equitable code of conduct for all students. And that, I think you will find, is riddled throughout all 3 of the new revisions. Promote a positive and effective learning environment, and have a clear and consistent code of conduct. So those were sort of our guiding forces as we got into the nuts and bolts of creating this. Again, Going back to the research, that qualitative data, quantitative data, all of the research, the countless hours that we spent looking at other school districts and looking at best practices through the state or through the U.S. Department of Education. But most importantly, doing what's best for Copeland Middle School, we settled on what is known as a tiered code of conduct model. Those of us in education are somewhat familiar with a tiered system. It looks somewhat like RTI, where you have tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. All right, and what this does is it allows us to categorize our infractions and our responses and interventions into those tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3 modules. Tier 1 are going to be your infractions that do not result in damage to property, severe disrespect, or bodily harm. So those are instances where, say for instance in a classroom, Dustin won't sit down, he had to stand up caught him standing up 3 times in class. You're using tier 1 interventions as a teacher to create an autonomous classroom where you have control of your classroom. You're not immediately referring to that student to administration, and you're addressing that. Some interventions might look like moving that child's seat, reaching out to the parent, having a conference with that student during lunch. Not necessarily a detention, but a conference where you talk about class expectations and moving forward. Those are tier 1 infractions and responses. Again, they do not lead to a referral to the administration. Tier 2 are going to be more serious than tier 1 infractions, and those do require a referral to the grade level administrator or myself, our administration, who's ever handling that at the moment. Those are going to be some of our much more common infractions that do result in some form of discipline. The chart for discipline is in the Code of Conduct. Once approved by the Board of Education, if approved, I should say, this will become available to the greater community. Those instances do result in disciplinary consequences. We're going to follow a progressive discipline model, and I'll share more about that in just a few moments. Tier 3 infractions are our most serious infractions. Those are going to be instances like fights, bringing a weapon to school, violation of our substance abuse policy. Those are instances that require immediate administrative intervention and often result in more serious disciplinary consequences. So the benefits of a tiered model are that it allows us to group infractions and interventions based on severity. It promotes a clear and concise means of addressing student infractions. It integrates community building practices without minimizing or eliminating discipline or accountability. Now that's another big one. All right, we are a district that has restorative practices embedded in a lot of the work that we do. And there's a lot of value in restorative practices. But what restorative practices can't do is replace the discipline. The restorative practices are meant to be a proactive approach and a reactive approach, but the discipline procedures through the Code of Conduct must be in place. And you'll find in this Code of Conduct that will hold true. This model clearly establishes behavioral infractions that should be addressed in the classroom versus infractions that should be referred to an administrator. Provides clarity in assigning consequences and remedial actions that support students, and helps to identify students who exhibit repeated tier 2 and tier 3 infractions. That's another big one. That is, through this model, is allowing us to channel supports and to channel services and resources to our at-risk students, our repeat offenders, who, quite frankly, are challenged with the behavioral model and what our expectations, what we expect here at Copeland Middle School. So, getting into tier 2 and tier 3, I talked some about what tier 1 interventions look like. Those are instances that are being addressed in the moment, but you might have a repetition of tier 1 behaviors, right? So you might have a student that same student, Dustin, who stood up 3 times in class today, reached out to the parent, come back the next day, he's still standing up in class, he's not listening, he's disrupting the flow of the class, and he's making it challenging for himself and other students to learn. That may now become a tier 2 consequence, all right? Tier 2 and tier 3, infraction. Tier 2 and tier 3 infractions do lead to disciplinary consequences, all right? Those consequences are clear and concise, again, providing clarity to students, staff, and parents about expected behaviors and disciplinary consequences. We're following a progressive discipline model, meaning that we are taking into consideration and acknowledging first offenses, second offenses, and third offenses, and acknowledging severity of the infraction. For instance, there might be a behavior that violates multiple infractions on the chart and may have a more serious consequence than a behavior that just violates one of those infractions. Promotes community building without minimizing or eliminating discipline, and accountability with clear expectations for behavior. Finally, what you're going to find to the board and those who will hopefully shortly see this revised code of conduct is riddled throughout the disciplinary consequences and interventions are student contracts. And the student contracts allow us to focus resources and support to those students who have a harder time with behavioral expectations. So I'll give you an example. You have a student who was written up for Tier 2 infraction, disrupting class, right? So we'll go back to that student who multiple days standing up, disrupting class. Level one, first offense, we're going to follow the code, 1 to 2 central detentions. Now, 2 weeks later, same situation, second offense, all right? By the time we get to second or third offense, we're building in contracts, student contracts, through the administrator's office, where we're talking to the family, we're talking to the counselors, we're talking to the teachers, and we're collecting information, and we're putting a plan in place for that student, because something's not working here for that student. And discipline alone, that student is not responding to discipline alone. So we need to put other interventions through a contract for that student. Now, what that contract might look like is, here's how we're going to support you. Here's our expectations for your behavior moving forward. Here are some potential future consequences or benefits to you adhering to the contract down the line. That could be things like potential loss of future privileges, that if a student has continued repeat offenses, that you could lose access to things like the field day or sporting events, or et cetera. And obviously that's going to be on an as-needed basis. What that also does through the contracts is create an environment where that student is not just being handed out discipline for infractions and not building upon more discipline and more discipline and more discipline. It provides an opportunity for that student where it's community building, it's relationship building and rapport building, where we're sitting with that student, we're putting the important players in the room, we're bringing the parents into the conversation, and we're creating a plan for that student moving forward. And so they know, look, you're a part of our family. You've stepped outside of our expectations for that family. You're still a part of this family. Here's how we're going to support you moving forward, but here's also our expectations for you moving forward. Moving into dress code and cell phone guidelines. Again, I'm not going to go into as an in-depth with these. I want to give you an overview of our thought process, and I'll start with dress code. Some of the things when we look at dress code, it was very important for us to consider the following considerations. First and foremost, the overall health and safety of our students, assuring that the dress and grooming of our students does not create disruptions to self or others, that our dress code is fair and equitable, recognizes student diversity in race, sex, gender identity expression, sexual orientation, ethnicity, religion, cultural observance, household income, or body type, size, etc. But also that we are to assure that we are preparing students for a world outside of Copeland Middle School, for high school, for college, for future careers and professions. So those are some of the guiding thoughts that went into our dress code. Again, the board has a copy of the dress code. Once passed, I do understand that many of our families are in the process or are about to be in the process of return to school shopping. So it will be my goal, once, if approved, to get this information out to our families as soon as possible so that they can buy clothes for their students that adhere to our revised dress code. Moving into cell phone and electronic device guidelines. So we went around the table as a committee for this one quite a bit. And what we talked about was two different schools of thought. We talked about a zero tolerance policy, where students, from the moment they walk into the building, they lock their cell phones in their lockers, and they don't take those cell phones out until the minute the last bell rings and they go to get on their buses, their pickup, or whatnot. Okay, so that was one school of thought. The other school of thought being a policy that understands cell phones exist, understands that other electronic devices exist, that people use them in the real world, that they are a part of our culture that we live in, but also that we as educators have a duty, a responsibility to promote acceptable and appropriate use. And as a committee, we came to a decision that we believe as educators that is our responsibility to help our students understand how to have a cell phone, have an electronic device on them, bring it to school and not be a distraction, and use that in an appropriate manner. But also that a cell phone, those electronic devices, are privileges to have in our building. Smartwatches, those are privileges to have in our building that can be revoked if needed. So our cell phone policies, you will see, the board will see, our parents will hopefully soon see, that is one that is centered around, silenced in a way. In essence, a student can carry their cell phone on them. A teacher reserves the right to collect cell phones at the beginning of class. They're in the front of the room. Students can see them. They're on silence. They're there. As a student, you can see it. It's safe, but it's off in a way. All right, when you leave class, they're returned. Again, the expectation is that they're not using them in the hallways. They're not using them in class. And we're giving that authority, providing that authority to our teachers in the classroom to remove cell phones from our students at the beginning. And I've really found, in my experience, that to be the most effective way of addressing this. So the next steps, you know, again, pending board approval, first and foremost is sharing this revised code of conduct, dress code, and cell phone electronic device guidelines with the greater community. We're going to use multiple measures to do that. We're going to get that out there as quickly as possible. The website, social media, you know, we're talking about putting videos out there and having, you know, examples for our students and our family of what's acceptable and what not. Providing clear and concise protocols to staff for implementation, reporting, and documentation. That's a big one, right? Because that falls under implementation. You know, we've done the easy work, and it's a lot of work, and I don't want to make it sound like what we did was easy, because it wasn't, but that's just the beginning. Now the real work starts, and that's on the implementation end of things, and that falls on me and my administration to make sure that that happens. And this is a big one, consistency. And that's huge, okay? And that's something we're going to adhere to big time here at Copeland Middle School. And that's that fell under a lot of the feedback, that qualitative feedback that I received, I talked about earlier, is consistency. And that's administrators, staff members in the hallways. It's holding true to our code of conduct. And, you know, while we understand there will always be extenuating circumstances, and those will be held on a case-by-case basis, it is our job to remain consistent with this, and that is the only way that this is going to work. And again, that's me. That falls on me as principal to make sure that that's happening. Let's see. I think I got one more, babe. Evaluate and reevaluate. That's a big one. All right. What we put in place this summer, we have to recognize. We may get to January and say, oh, we forgot something. We forgot this, or we should have put this in the code, or this isn't working. We need to be more strict on this, or we have to take into consideration for that. That's an extremely important part of education, is understanding when to evaluate and reevaluate. And we might be next summer, you know, making revisions to this. And that's okay, because we're moving along with the times. That's it. I want to certainly open it up to any questions that the board might have for me. And certainly I want to thank, again, our committee. I want to thank, you know, Mr. Rawlings, our assistant principal. Him and I spent countless hours on this, locked in rooms, just throwing every scenario at the wall and just trying to look at it from different scenarios. And certainly Dr. Corbett for his guidance, vision, and leadership, and me calling him, quite frankly, even before I even started here and starting those conversations. So thank you. All right, any questions?
Any questions? The only thing I had was just a comment. I commend you for the work that's been done here. It's a great starting point, and definitely something that needed to be done. So awesome work by the committee. The only recommendation I had here was, since the document is living and breathing, I recommend adding the students to the qualitative process to this, being that they're a significant portion of the population that's inside of the culture that's here. And being that 80% of them are, I'll call them law-abiding, but they're
Yeah.
they're responding well to the rules that are inside of the facility. They should have the ability to be able to give their feedback in some way, shape, or form. And it doesn't have to be a large group, but a portion of it to allow them the opportunity to be able to be part of implementing the culture that is here inside the building. So that's my recommendation to you, is allow them as a primary stakeholder to have a seat at the table to be able to give you that feedback.
I appreciate that. Absolutely. You know what? That's something that came up in our committee. And certainly we talked about, as we get into the school year, creating an opportunity of platforms for students to make comments and be a part of that process moving forward. Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to say thanks for this as well, and just point out, because I know this was important for the community members that I spoke to, that your cell phone policy doesn't only cover having cell phones, it covers their use, recording other students, recording teachers. And I thought that was so important to have, so I appreciate that.
Good. Yes. Yeah, that's very important.
I want to thank Dustin. I'm sorry, did you have something?
Yeah, I
Tanya?
just
Go
want to
ahead.
also thank the community. I've been on a lot of parent committees in the past, and I know it takes a lot of time. So to the parents, administrators, and teachers, thank you so much. And also, kind of off topic, but I love how you just kept saying the word community. So maybe that's your motto for the year, is building a community?
I love it. I love it.
Thank you. So thank you, Dustin, because, this is key. He's right. I don't think he wasn't approved yet. After though well, he was approved to be, but he didn't start. But we were talking about this. This is hitting the ground running, and it's so very, very important. It's the key that will unlock the door to a improved culture. Now, the other key is, I'm going to say this publicly on a very serious note, and you mentioned it here, but I'll reiterate it for the purpose of emphasis. It is that this will not work. This will not work unless the teachers, the staff, consistently implement it, right? Consistently enforce it. I hate to use the word enforcement, but implement it, support it, right? That's what's going to be key. So we'll look forward to opportunities to meet with the faculty and staff to go over the details and minutiae of this code of conduct and how it's going to be supported, so that it's consistent. Otherwise, you have the good guys and the bad guys, good girls, bad girls. The ones that support it and consistently implement it, and those that don't. And that's what we don't want. We want consistency. So I know that I just want to reemphasize the point, but thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I just wanted to say thank you so much for working tirelessly so that this could, be rolled out to not only families, prior to the school year, but also to the staff, so that, we can hit the ground running. We appreciate it.
I appreciate that, and the thank you goes both ways, because it was very important to the committee to have this approved for day one, and certainly the board and Dr. Corbett allowing us to make this happen and reviewing it over the weekend. I appreciate that as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.